She created the Inaden line of leather goods, which means craftsman in the Tamashek dialect, a language of Berber origin. And it's no coincidence our guest Naten Ngoy has indeed drawn from her family history and her love of authentic craftsmanship the deep desire to work with Africa. And very logically, her steps led her to the lands of the largest African herd, Ethiopia. She shared her journey and her challenges to Laurence Strass and Thierry Schiller.
Naten Ngoy, hello. Welcome to Initiative Africa, founded an accessories and leather goods brand Inaden in 2013. We wanted to create a company as well as work with Africa. Why?
Parce que j'ai grandi
Because I grew up in a mixed family with a father from the Congo who gave me the desire to build something that connects me with the continent, with Africa. He had many regrets about leaving his country, mostly for political reasons. And he really transmitted to me the idea that in Africa there was a lot to do, that you could do everything, anything. And then when I grew up, finished my studies and had my first professional experience, I realized that it's true. Why not Africa and try to build something that would be of value there?
It
was a way for me to take advantage of being mixed race and return to Africa, the continent my father had left for other reasons.
To produce your bags, you collaborate with African artisans in a workshop in Ethiopia. How does this work?
Well, that's right. It's a country I chose for leather goods because it's not well known. It's something that I discovered when I did my research to set up my business. It's the biggest livestock country on the African continent. It's a big exporter of skins, and I thought I should go there to produce a brand of bags. And so I went there, visited many workshops, met people, established relationships of trust, and pushed the doors of various workshops. It aroused my curiosity and I started learning. I didn't know anything about the leather industry, how to work with leather. And you mentioned collaboration. Yes, it's a partnership. Today, after 10 years, we can talk about partnership indeed. It is really on a win-win basis. I come up with ideas, I come up with a project, and I exchange them with people who want to participate in it, who also see some interest, whether economic or other, and want to grow together with my business.
Recently, inflation has risen sharply in Africa. All exporters are feeling it. How are you dealing with this situation at your level?
So yes, it's a situation that is not obvious, especially recently. I was surprised by my last production. It surprised everyone, so it affected my activity and the raw materials. The price of raw materials has tripled. We also have energy prices that have really increased. And so for now, there was no other choice than to absorb these costs, in fact, to absorb and accept it in a certain way. Increase in these costs, we don't have a choice. We have been hit hard by this inflation. In Ethiopia, they were also quite strongly affected and surprised. I mean, for them too, it's not easy. They find themselves buying materials costing 3 times more all of a sudden. They're a bit helpless. So there are 2 options. Either you stop doing business with them, and then you stop everything, or you support the activity. You absorb the costs, the shock, and try for the next time maybe to either rework perhaps the sourcing, anticipate better, and maybe keep more stocks. There are other ways of possibly protecting ourselves against this inflationary shock.
It involves some sort of burden share. Would this somehow strengthen the relationship between you, a young French company, and these Ethiopian artisans?
Well, yes, that puts everyone in the same boat. Now, when you're faced with a context like this, when you're told that materials have tripled anyway, and that it's justified, here we're talking about imports, where, for example, you want to make leather, so you import chemical components that come from Italy or the United States. So the scarcity, the cost of the product, all that justifies it.
Le coût du produit, enfin tout ça fait que ça se justifie. En fait,
these are not costs that come out of nowhere. In fact, when your partner explains this to you and that he's annoyed, as you are, he knows your position. He knows that you have been working with him for years.
Il n'est pas très à l'aise de vous annoncer ça. Donc,
he's not comfortable telling you that. We try to understand where it comes from. When we adopt a position, we also try to explain that it's difficult to get this information last minute and that it will impact the rest of the activity. But we are in an honest discussion, open, and we try to find solutions. Yes, this necessarily strengthens the bonds. We remain in this relationship of trust and burden sharing, as you say. It allows us to strengthen our ties.
Je pense que ça permet de renforcer des liens.
Vos produits sont fabriqués en Afrique.
Your products are made in Africa, but the design is still done in Europe. What do you think of African designers? What do you see emerging in this sphere?
Alors moi, je vois émerger beaucoup de créativité.
So I see a lot of creativity emerging. I'm delighted today that African designers are being honored. We can see the extent to which Africa inspires the international fashion scene.
On voit les influences, on les voit dans les défilés.
We can see the influences, we can see them in the catwalks, we can see them everywhere, in the choice of patterns, textiles. And finally today, the fact that African designers are working with traditional African textile fabrics with this desire to promote African know-how and cultural heritage is excellent.
C'est toute une génération de designers africains.
But there's also a whole generation of African designers who also work with other materials, not necessarily from the continent, and who also show that there's this mix, there's this influence of fashion, which is not necessarily limited to who you are, where you come from, but simply to talent. And yes, there are talented designers in Africa who don't necessarily limit themselves to working only with a loincloth, kente or indigo. Who can also work with other fabrics just because they are talented, they are creative, and really they send out a very positive, very dynamic image of the talent and potential of Africa in general.
Du potentiel de l'Afrique d'une manière générale.
Natty Ngoy, vous êtes française.
Natty Ngoy, you were born in France of Congolese origin. How do you feel about arriving in Africa as a young French entrepreneur? Is your cultural mix an advantage or a disadvantage?
Oh, c'est une question pas si évidente.
Well, it's not such an obvious question. First, it's intimidating when you're a young French woman, a young entrepreneur, and you're setting foot for the first time in a country you don't know. It's true that I chose to go to Ethiopia for my business.
Vraiment pragmatique. Je connaissais pas ce pays du tout.
It was a pragmatic choice. I didn't know this country at all. So yes.
C'est vrai que moi, après 10 années à faire.
I was necessarily intimidated, and it's true that after 10 years of going back and forth to Ethiopia, of having established relationships there, of having spent much time really getting into the rhythm of the local people, well, I think that it's really through these trips that we have a form of humility that allows us to establish relationships with the people on the ground and not to arrive on conquered ground, because sometimes this is what we are criticized for, or at least that's what people may assume. That's the impression they might get.
Peut y avoir cette impression-là.
Une classe moyenne supérieure
An upper middle class is developing in Africa and a wealthy population is in large urban centers. Are there a potential target for Inaden?
Cible pour Inaden.
Alors oui, ce serait une cible.
So yes, they would be a perfect target. There's a real desire among Africans today to consume differently.
Des Africains de consommer différemment. Alors, c'est vraiment cette classe moyenne.
It's really this middle class that has aspirations, the means. They work, they have a taste for beautiful things, and they can afford them.
Pendant très longtemps, les références, c'était des références
For a very long time, the references were Western bronze, and Western style. Today, I think we can see that there are a lot of concept stores, a lot of African galleries, a lot of designers who are setting up in Africa, in a lot of countries, and who want to offer beautiful products, quality products to this middle class, seeking to consume differently.
De la qualité à cette classe moyenne qui aspire à consommer différemment,
to buy beautiful products which are made by Africans, made in Africa, and perhaps which suit them more, and hence create added value through this consumption. We could talk about some sort of commitment towards local consumption, some kind of engagement, and also there's this desire to be proud of what we can produce here or what we can find here locally.
Yet 98% of your customers are still outside Africa. Would you like to see some change here?
Oui, ça a toujours été un peu ma volonté.
Yes, it has always been my wish, and at the same time, I have been confronted with this reality. Today, Inaden is distributed mainly in France and Europe. So finding stores in Africa, finding the right points of sale, the right places where we can offer our products at a specific price to a clientele that can afford them is not an obvious challenge on the African continent, but it is starting to take root.
Moi, je vois bien que depuis quelques années, vraiment, il y a
For a few years now, there has been this proposal for this market which is still emerging. So I'd like to work on the development of stores and points of sales in Africa. For a few years now, 3 or 4 years, I have really seen a movement emerging in France, in Europe, with this desire to consume African, to consume made in Africa. And hopefully customers realize that, okay, today there are alternatives. We don't have to go and consume from big luxury brands that may not bring anything to the continent, but to go and support initiatives, brands that have a link with who we are. There's a real desire to consume in an engaged manner. I mean, we, the Afro-descendants, the African diaspora, because that's also how we're going to support a positive movement and participate in change.
You will soon be creating a line of jewelry, another area in which you will be working with African craftsmen.
Oui. Oui, tout à fait. Alors, depuis,
yes, absolutely. So, for a few seasons now, I've been working with Tuareg jewelers, master artisans. I really like to talk about master artisans because you can get an idea of Tuareg jewelry by seeing them sitting cross-legs making the jewels like that.
En fait, c'est un artisanat qui
But in fact, it's an art, a handicraft, centuries old, that is traditional. They clearly have some kind of magic in their hands. I find it magical to see what they can do with very few tools.
Très peu d'outils. Et du coup, avec les bijoutiers Touareg.
And so, with the Tuareg jewelers, I have this idea to mix, to really converge their know-how. This tradition that they have, that they pass on from generation to generation, and to combine it with modernity, style, a design that will speak to my clients, that will talk to women who like beautiful objects, who like craftsmanship, who want simple things that are authentic but of quality.
Les choses simples, qui sont authentiques mais de qualité. Et l'idée, c'est vraiment de réussir.
And the idea is really to succeed in mixing the two. So I've had a small range of jewelry for a few seasons now. The idea is to go a little further and preserve this know-how, enhance it, and find finesse of the work. We don't work on molds. Each piece is made by hand. And where you find this Tuareg identity, which is very specific to craftsmanship and to the Tuareg jewelry making art.
À la bijouterie Touareg, mais de lui apporter, de lui insuffler quelque chose de.
But to give it a little more modern touch, so that it can appeal to people who like Inaden and who like fashion.
Ou qui aiment simplement la mode, quoi.
Alors justement, vous dites qu'il y a énormément de talents et de
Indeed, you mentioned that there are a lot of talents and resources in Africa. Do you feel engaged in the promotion and protection of this African craftsmanship? And if yes, how?
Comment s'y prendre?
Oui, je pense que c'est très
It is very important to preserve it, to promote it.
de le valoriser. Il y a énormément de savoir.
There's a real loss of know-how, in fact.
Comment les préserver?
So how do you preserve it?
Je pense que c'est à travers peut-être des initiatives.
It's through initiatives like mine, but also like others are doing locally. There are also people locally who are committed to this. Is to bring this know-how, give it a more modern side, give this craft a new life, so that even locally, people can realize that it has value.
De redonner des lettres de noblesse à cet artisanat que même localement, les personnes puissent se rendre compte que oui, ça a de la valeur en fait. Et aussi, c'est de rémunérer
and pay
justement les
the
artisans.
craftsmen
C'était
more
un peu
fairly.
déplacé.
They were looked down on in society.
Vraiment, le
And we have to
travail
change that and show
à faire,
people
c'est
that
de
this
montrer que non,
craft
cet
is
artisanat,
rich
ça
and
a
can
une
bring
richesse,
value. And this
que ça
comes
peut
with the
apporter
design
de la
work.
valeur. Et je pense que ça vient avec un travail de design, un travail de promotion aussi.
Promote these crafts to explain and tell the story behind the
Comment c'est
products.
fabriqué.
And then, above all, the people who make them can support themselves, can earn a living, and they can also be proud of their work.
Besoin, puissent gagner leur vie et que puissent être fiers aussi de leur travail.
It's really
Je
through
pense vraiment
this
que
that
ça
we can
passe
succeed.
par cette filiation en fait. Voilà.
Thank you, Nathy Ngoy, for your time.
Sans prière.
Thank you very much.